Hello. So today we are going to look at a different subject than the usual. We are going to look at a function in Python that is very useful. It's in the package Itertools. So this is basically a package that contains different methods that can be used on iterators or on iterables. And so let's look at this one first. So right now it's called ziplongest. And what it does is it returns an object basically. Essentially, without looking at all of this text here, you just give it a list of iterables. It can be two, it can be just one, and it can be two, three, whatever the number is. You could provide as many iterators as you want, and then you can provide a fill value. I will speak about that later, but essentially what it will do is, if you are familiar with zip, it will do a similar thing, except zip behavior is that if one of the iterables is longer, it will just drop the items from the longer one and just zip together the remaining stuff. Let me illustrate with an example. But zip longest will do something different, where it will take the longest one and include all of its content, and the ones that come up short, it will just replace them with this fill value here. So let me first illustrate with an example. Say we want to use the normal one, zip, right? So if we just use zip, let's say we give it a, b, c, d, and give it just 2 x and y, right? So okay, so import. So yeah, zip is not in iterables. It's not in Itertools. It's just in the standard library. So if I use just zip, what will happen is, let me just convert it to a list so that we can see what happens. So you could see we pair a with x and we pair b with y. So that's what zip does. It just pairs element from each list with the other one. And so you can see it dropped c and d, right? Now if I use Itertools zip longest, so exact same thing, I'm just using zip longest. What happens is c and d get included, right? So contrary to what zip did. So it uses the longest one as the base, kind of, and then just fills the rest with none. If you don't give it anything, it fills the rest with none. But you could say there is another parameter you could pass, which is called the fill value, and you could pass whatever you want this none to be, right? So you could say, for example, I want blank, right? So you can see none is replaced with blank. And so that's the main idea behind zip longest here, is that we include all the elements from the longest iterable, and then just fill for the shorter one, fill with the blank. For the zip, it just drops the rest basically and uses only the parts that are of equal length, kind of, right? Now let's take a slightly more complicated example just to see how we can use zip longest in different scenarios. So let's say we have this example a, b, c, d, e, f, right? Maybe g, maybe just k, l, m, n. Just a long sequence, right? Like this, right? Long string like this. And let's say we want to divide it into chunks of length 3, right? So chunks of length 3. So that would mean we will want ABC, and then DEF, and then GKL, and then MN. Now you can see the last sequence has only 2 letters. So let's say the problem says that for the last one, if it has less than 3 letters, just return those 2. So we would have then ABC, DEF, GKL, and then MN, right? So how can we do this? Well, you could see here kind of it hints to using zip longest, right? Because we want the last one to just return whatever is there, right? But how can we give the chunks of 3 using zip, right? The main idea is that you could zip an iterable with itself, right? So we could, for example, do zip s with s, right? Let's just see what that gives us. So that you can see it zips each element with the next, right? And so that kind of gives you an idea of maybe we need something similar. Maybe we need to zip it with the next, but excluding excluding maybe the first one, right? So you can see now we have A, B, and B, C. So maybe something like that would be. Okay, so we know that zip is in the right track, right? To be able to get chunks of longest 3 of S here. But one thing we need to look at also is this, that will help us, is this iter function, which basically just takes an iterable and converts it to an iterator. What is an iterator? An iterator is just same thing as an iterable, except it keeps track of the position, and every time you ask it for the next value, it gives you the next value after that position. So what do I mean by that? If we take iter of S, let's just call it I, right? So we know our S is this one. If we say next of I, it gives us A. If we say next of I again, it gives us B. And so if we keep going, you can see here it's kind of having a position, and every time you ask it for the next, it gives you the next character, right? And so this is where we can apply that with zip. So what if we take, let's say for our S here, what if we have, say, two iterators pointing to the same, two variables pointing to the same iterator, right? So if you do next for I1, you should get A, the first element, right? Now E2 is the same iterator except a different variable. So if we do that, you see you get B, right? So the iterator advanced when we did next of I1. So it changes the same iterator, so the variable changes. So this is what we are going to use with zip. So if I go back here and have this and do zip of I1 and I2, what happens, right? So now these two iterators pointing to this, right? So if I zip them together, let's see what happens. I need to convert it to a list so you can see what happens. So you can see it pairs every element with the next AB and then CD. So it pairs AB and then CD and then EF and then GK and then all the way until the rest, right? So why did it do this? Because zip, what it does is just takes the next of E1, pairs it with the next of E2. And well, once you do the next of E1, which was A here, the next of E2 is B, right? Because it's the same iterator. So this is the idea that we are going to use. So now let's just expand that and have another iterator. Let's say 3, another variable pointing to the same iterator, and pass that to zip. So you can see now the same thing happens. Now all 3 gets paired, right? Because we do the next for the first iterator, and then next for the second, and then next for the third, and we get these 3. And this is exactly what we wanted. These are the chunks that we wanted, right? Now the only problem we need to solve is that M and N are removed because we are using zip, right? So what we need here is zip longest so that we can keep M and N. So you can see now if we do zip longest, yeah, it's in Itertools, so let's use it from Itertools. Okay, so I need, yeah, the iterators, once they get used up, it becomes empty. So I just need to initialize them. And then now if I do that, now I have 3 chunks, and then M and N, and then none here at the end, right? So I have the last group, but with none. If I want to kind of change that a little bit and maybe say the fill value is maybe just underscore, right? Let me just do that again with underscore. Yeah, I will need to reinitialize the iterators here. So you could see here I get the chunks, and if it doesn't, the last group doesn't contain 3, we just put underscore, right? And so this is exactly what we can apply here. And so our final solution would be just something like this, where we just use so basically what I did here with I1, I2, I3, well, that can be accomplished by saying just, well, my list of arguments is equal to this multiplied by 3. So it's just a list of the same iter 3 times. That's exactly what I did here, right? And now to pass it to zip longest, because I don't want it to be passed as a list, I can just use argument unpacking. And so what that means is instead of passing this here, I could just pass star args, which just will take the list and just unpack it and pass each element separately, right? And so now I get the same result. And so that's what I'm using here, where I'm just multiplying whatever n is in my example on the console, that is 3, and then I use ziplongest, and then I unpack, and now with something like this, a b c d e f g and 3, I get a b c d and then d e f and then g, and then the rest gets filled with x, which is exactly what we used. So you can see here, this is very useful. We were able to divide this into chunks. Like initially the problem doesn't seem like zip would be useful, but here, using the fact that the property of iter, we were able to use it. Yeah, so I think that's it for ziplongest. I will try to do more examples of Itertools functions next. Please like this video and subscribe, and thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.